Colorado's Amendment 64 was passed on November 6, 2012, carrying 55% of the vote. It legalized the production and sale of marijuana and all marijuana-related products in the state for recreational purposes, and went into effect on January 1, 2014.
I just like to, smoke a joint every now and then.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
You dick!
Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, brought to you by VoteProPot.com.
Welcome to episode 4. I'm Jay Brittany.
I'm Phil Adams.
I'm Andrew McCready's.
We really appreciate our audience, and we'd love to hear from you. We appreciate suggestions for topics, for shows. You can reach us via email at votepropot@gmail.com.
Or check us out at VoteProPot.com.
Or follow and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/VoteProPot.
Today, Andrew's going to take us through some of the facts and figures and generally fill us in on what's happened in Colorado in the last approximately 4 years since Amendment 64 was passed and marijuana is recreationally legal. Andrew?
So Amendment 64 passed in Colorado and it became legal 4 to 5 years ago. One of the big complaints a lot of people had about legalizing cannabis was the fact that they thought it was going to greatly increase the number of teen use. Now we are 5 years later, and they've done polling and research, and they realize that teen use hasn't increased at all. In fact, it's gone down. Some polls say it definitely fluctuates, but it is no more than the national average. It's like right on. So it really had no effect on teens. No increased effect.
Okay, school kids too? We're talking about high school?
Yeah, high school kids.
Yeah.
Now, people over 65, their use increased by 300%.
Wow.
Now, why?
Why? Because especially seniors are switching from using pharmaceuticals, using cannabis, to treat chronic pain, sleep problems.
Also, I think it's a cultural thing. It's, especially that generation are thinking, I can't do this, it's illegal. And now it's legal, so I think it's easier for them to kind of say, yeah, I'm going to try this.
That is happening. There's a lot of people are saying how I smoked when I was younger, now I'm smoking again now that it's legal. And a lot of people, and I know two guys in this room, that when they heard they were going to have children, their bong got thrown in the trash.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. You guys voluntarily, wasn't even a question, not even a debate.
Right, and it wasn't even an issue. It wasn't even a problem.
Right.
It just, we threw it away.
Now, did you wait, when you found out you were going to be a father, you threw it away, or did you wait till they were about to bring the baby home?
I wait till they were walking around, and they might find it.
I waited until they wanted the keys. Actually, I had already kind of moved on from smoking weed by the time I'd even gotten married. So, but not by much, but I was already into responsible adult mode. Bummer. But yeah, but when you think about the other aspect of the senior citizens who are into smoking marijuana, if you were 20 years old and you were at Woodstock, in 1969, it's now 40 years later, and you're in your 60s.
Well, almost 50 years.
Yeah, that's
almost.
right.
Almost 50 years later. If it's 49 years later, so you're getting up there.
Yeah, definitely. But you're still cool.
But you still have to stay away from the brown acid, man.
Yeah. Well, so far in Colorado, some of the things that we're worried about have not happened. Another thing, people, the pro, besides the fact that it's just the bad law. I mean, and it's just because it's done more harm than good. And cannabis is not, you can't die from it. Very few harmful, if any, harmful side effects. Now, one thing that has happened since they've started, since 2014, state of Colorado has taken over almost $750 million in tax revenue. $750 million in tax revenue. Now, they're spending that money on schools, on drug treatment and prevention, as well as I know they just put $16 million, which out of $750 million is not that much, but $16 million towards finding food and shelter for homeless people.
I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you still got this argument going on because it really hasn't been long enough yet. The studies, both sides of the argument have their studies, but
Correct.
some of these numbers you can't argue with. I mean, you can't argue with the sales. They're looking at $5 billion in sales and revenues in 4 years approximately. And that's a lot of taxes. We're talking about, I got numbers here, man. It's $770 million in taxes, revenues, or taxes, license fees, etc. That's almost $1 billion, $750 million.
Just from cannabis and cannabis products.
Exactly. And that doesn't even count the jobs that's been created.
Well, that's what not only do you take in the tax revenue, you also take in from all these jobs, the tens of thousands of jobs that have been created. They're paying income tax where people weren't working before.
What kind of jobs are we looking at?
In everything from growers to trimmers to bud trimmers to bud tenders.
Bud tenders.
I mean, across the board, packaging, processing, and growing.
So really, whatever goes into a manufacturing or agricultural
plus all
process,
right?
All the other businesses.
But then also, you have your plumbers, real estate agents, your electricians that are getting work, and in addition to that. The taxpayer is saving money because they're not putting as much towards law enforcement. There's every state spends a different amount, but obviously every state spends a lot of money on arresting and processing people for cannabis. And when last year 750,000 people got arrested for possession.
Not to mention it frees up time for the
officers to follow more to pursue violent criminals.
Right. Exactly.
Because so many of the arrests are people other than being arrested for cannabis. Other than that, they've done nothing illegal. There's a lot of people that are good law-abiding citizens, and they smoke cannabis to self-medicate. A great percentage of people who do drugs, even drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes, they do it because it makes them feel better.
And why not?
One of the arguments I keep hearing, I keep reading some of those on the other side, talk about fatal car accidents. And I think you have to really, that's one of the things you'll see in some of the reports, but you have to really delve into the numbers because there are a lot of reasons why. Well,
what happened was that once they started, when they made it legal, more people, especially the people that are against reform, they want to find bad information.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what they started actually testing every fatal accident and started testing the people, even if they weren't driving or the cause of driving or at fault in the accident.
Now, I don't think it does any good to avoid the bad statistics. If there are some bad results, it doesn't do any good to ignore that.
But what they're doing is anyone in an accident, they get tested, and if they test positive for marijuana, they said it's a cannabis-related accident, whereas they could have smoked 3 weeks ago, and they were not.
True.
Like alcohol-related accidents. If you're drunk and you stumble in the street and get hit by a car, that's an alcohol-related traffic accident.
One of the big up-and-coming businesses in Colorado and everywhere else, all these companies are racing to find a test.
Yeah.
A test like a DUI
a breathalyzer for cannabis.
And there's a couple companies coming close, and I don't have the name in front of me. But
what happens if you ate it? If you had an edible?
That's
an edible's
the problem.
Not going to test.
It's not like alcohol.
It's not going to test.
It's so difficult a test. But there are a couple there's one that's, I think it's about to go public, and it's some kind of a swab test where they do a saliva test, and there's some kind of an enzyme in there that's only there for 6 hours after
you smoke it. What happens if you vape it?
Exactly. There's so many different ways of ingesting.
Or if you're doing a dab,
alcohol, you're pretty much stuck with drinking. Right. Except for rum cake or something, that's not going to cause an accident.
Well,
once we get to the point where people can, one of the other episodes we were talking about the fact that you can't do tests on cannabis and the effects of cannabis because of it being a Schedule I drug. When we get to the point where we can test that, there is currently all kinds of statistical evidence about the effects of alcohol as far as impairing your driving ability. After this many ounces or this much percentage, you're impaired by this much. They've really done rigorous testing on that. They haven't done anything of the kind, I'm sure, with cannabis.
Or they're just starting to,
They did. I did read one study about driving under the influence of cannabis, and one thing they found was if you're an experienced cannabis user and you smoke, they said it barely inhibited your driving at all. It's the people who've never smoked before, and then they go out
And they freak out behind the wheel.
yeah, or what happens is some of these people, for the first time they try cannabis, let's say they'll try an edible. There's an article from the woman from the New York Times. She ate a couple of gummy bears and it didn't do anything to her.
Yeah.
So she ate a couple more, and they were like 50 milligram, and it was something outrageous. She just ate like
She had a very bad
way
night.
too much. Yeah, she had a really bad experience. And but what she did would be equivalent to, I'm going to try alcohol for the first time, so I'm going to drink a whole bottle of tequila. Right. As opposed to just having a beer or a glass of wine,
Or a shot,
one
yeah.
or two.
Yeah.
So far this year, approximately as of the time when the article was written, when I read, Colorado's brought in $119 million in tax from cannabis and $38 million from alcohol.
Wow.
Now, you might say, wow, they're
Well,
smoking.
there's a pretty high. There's a 15%,
Well, there's a reason for it. There's a
yeah.
reason for that. Because alcohol, you're just paying the regular
Sales tax.
In Colorado, there's a 2.9% sales tax on consumer good. So on recreational cannabis, it's a 2.9 sales tax, a 15% excise tax, and a 10% special sales tax.
Shoo.
So now, but in Colorado, if you have a medical card, you just pay the sales tax. I know in Colorado they call it a discount card. They don't call it a medical card.
Still, that's a crazy tax.
Well,
Good grief.
so many people especially during activism, they go tax it. I mean, don't make it
Yeah.
illegal. Tax it. Use the money. And
Yeah,
I
I
think,
never could understand that because it doesn't.
Yeah. It drives it back underground.
Well, there's a level at which it does.
Yeah,
Yes, there's
absolutely.
a level. I mean, at which it becomes, no longer economical to do it out in the open. You go underground with
And
it.
you're talking about a total tax now of 25%, 27%. That's good. That's a third of the. That's crazy.
well, since 2015, the state of Colorado has issued 100,000 medical cards a year. I mean, so that's going to have an effect. A lot of these states, with now the fact that the federal government is trying to cut back spending, trying to downsize the amount of downsize government, and another thing they want to stop. Federal government wants to stop giving as much money to the states. So some of these states are seeing like $750 million in tax revenue is huge. So what's happening is all these states, they're just the cannabis. It's a tax boom for them, and it's going to save some states. It could really save their asses.
Well, I wonder if that'll level out at some point.
Well,
it
eventually
will.
maybe.
Yeah.
But what's happening is when they're first starting, especially like Colorado, 25%. That's pretty steep, and people are willing to. They'd rather pay 25% tax and get arrested.
Right. Sure.
Right, but there are, with the tax cut of 2017, it put a cap on state and local tax deductions
Right.
on your federal income taxes at $10,000, and the people who are especially wealthy residents of blue states where the tax rates are extremely high, they end up having a much larger tax bill. And as a result, a lot of people are moving out of those states, and the states are losing revenue.
This is
Now,
a way to make up, I
This
guess.
could be a way for those blue states who are getting pinched with the Trump tax cuts to make up some of that loss.
That's true. Well, Andrew, let me ask you this. What effect do you think, and this goes back to the high tax, what effect has legalization had on the black market? Because you wonder how much, and Phil brought this up in the last episode, how much you drive it back towards the black market or the gray market by having a 25 and 30% tax on it. So in other words, let me ask you this. Legalizing marijuana, how much effect has that had on dissipating the black market and, illegal sales and
Well, one of the first
Crime
things.
and
Well,
that-
actually, when they started legalizing the statewide United States, the first thing it affected was the Mexican brickweed, because that was such low quality, and they were smuggling it in by the truckload, and people were, and that was pretty much a staple in some parts of the United States. That's what, if you wanted weed, that's what you got. Now with the legalization and now this medical grade and high grade Centennial, it's driving the price of the Mexican brickweed down.
Down
So
to zero.
now there's all these Mexican farmers that don't.
Well, I think
There's no
don't have
demand for it.
Don't have demand. They make more money growing tomatoes.
And the smugglers, the importers.
Right. But what also is happening in Colorado is And we're going to have this problem as long as as long as it's illegal federally and illegal.
You're always going to have some black market.
It's going to be a black market
just
there.
getting it here to D.C.
And what has happened in Colorado is all the neighboring illegal states that people go to Colorado, buy it legally, and then go sell it. Leave the state
it
and sell
across
it illegally.
state lines and
sell
sell
it
it.
illegally.
Right.
Now that's what they call the gray market. It's grown legally, but sold illegally. So yes, they're still making cannabis arrests, but they are making
for what in Colorado?
In Colorado,
for people trying to take it across
state lines, or they're selling if they find someone selling illegally. Now, but also still in Colorado, if you're African American or Hispanic, you're 3 times as likely to get arrested than if you're white. I mean, even in Colorado, we're still having these issues.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Now, it's also, I've heard that the airports are especially vigilant. I mean, they have dogs sniffing, people at the security points, and
I didn't. When I went to Colorado, I didn't see that.
How strict are they about that? I mean, if you get caught and you got a roach or you got a joint or something in your suitcase,
or you got a candy bar,
right?
How can they? What I did hear, I did talk to one activist or one person at a cannabis conference. They said when I fly, in the United States from state to state, I always bring weed with me. And they said a few times the TSA agents have found it. Yeah. I showed them my medical card. They put it back in my bag and said, "See you later."
No kidding. No matter where you were traveling,
right? As long as you're in the in
the United States, right?
No kidding. 48 continental states. But apparently what has happened, the TSA, to make a cannabis arrest for possession, the TSA doesn't do it. They have to call a local police officer. And in a lot of areas, the feds and the locals don't really get along that great. So they're like,
that's true.
I'm telling you, just go have a nice vacation. I'm not going to call the local cops on you.
Yeah.
But then again, you're going to get one agent that's going to find a seed and he's going to call a SWAT team out. Yeah. So I'd be very careful.
Well, I saw some numbers. Let me ask you about this. There's some early data, and it is early, that opioid use is down fairly significantly. I think I read between 6 and 10% since legalization. And in fact, it's been down at a higher rate each year for the past 4 years. So that's a big plus, I would think, if those numbers turn up to be correct. It's still early. I mean, that's the biggest problem is you've only got 3 or 4 years of real data.
Well, I did read another article that said in states where recreational cannabis is legal, opioid deaths dropped by 25%.
Yeah, I saw that too. That's
not insignificant at all.
That's huge.
That's big.
Here, I've got the article right here. According to a 2014 study in the Journal of American Medical Association,
states with medical marijuana laws between 1999 and 2010 saw on average about 25% fewer opioid overdose deaths than states without such laws.
Significant. That's huge.
That's huge.
Well, in Israel, they started years ago. They started what the doctor, his goal was to get people dependent on cannabis instead of opioids, because he says it's so much easier to quit cannabis. I mean, to quit cannabis, the worst side effect is that you really clean your bong and scrape all the resin out.
Right.
And you start smoking the seeds and stems.
Right.
Whereas heroin, you feel like crap. I mean, and you're sick as a dog.
No question. Well, I think that so many people are giving that a try. Even people who aren't any part of the drug culture are willing. I mean, if you've been on opioids for any period of time, you get to a point where you say, man, this isn't working for me. And these people are willing to try it, willing to try cannabis. And a lot of time, there's a lot of these studies are saying that it really is a very effective pain medication.
Yes. No, definitely very effective. And it's one of the most harmless substances out there. Actually, yesterday we had someone post on the VoteProPot Facebook page, and I posted an article about using cannabis as an exit drug for people who are addicted to opioids and helps them get off of it. It definitely diminishes the effect of the withdrawal, because the withdrawal from heroin addiction or opiate addiction is like a really bad flu.
It's horrible.
Now, that's whether you're doing heroin or you're doing OxyContin. It is identical.
Same compound.
Well, it's
going to be the same.
OxyContin is heroin in pill form.
That's right.
But the difference is OxyContin, when you get a pill of 200 milligrams, it's 200 milligrams. You know what you're dealing with.
Right.
When you're buying illegal heroin, you don't know the strength. That's why these people are either finding them dead with the needles in their arms. All of a sudden, they get some really strong stuff, and that they're not used. That normally they could do that amount, whatever.
But their bodies can't take it.
Their body
and
can't handle it. Yeah.
I was just going to ask this question regarding recreational personal use. I was in Denver about 2 years ago, and walking down the streets of Denver, Colorado, all of a sudden you catch a whiff and there it is. How much out in the open?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Are there cafes? Are you allowed to do that? I mean,
not in Colorado. Now, that's one of the. There's some legislation being written up and proposed to allow you to smoke in public. Right now, it's illegal. It's like drinking in public. You just can't. If you're out sitting on the street smoking, drinking a beer or smoking a joint, you get a ticket.
Okay,
I get that.
Which is fair enough. Just fair enough.
Yeah.
But they are trying to come up with like a coffee house license, like in Amsterdam,
right,
where you can buy over the counter. You just buy as many puffs as you want.
And if you're the proprietor of a hash bar, yeah.
But another thing that's happened in Colorado is they did a poll. 61% of the people polled said that people of Coloradans,
I think.
Coloradans.
Yeah.
61% of them said that the legalizing cannabis has had a positive effect on their state. Now, I think it's like 19% said that they thought it had a bad effect on their state, negative effect, and the rest of the people were neutral. But what they have found, and I've seen that when I visited Colorado, it's cannabis culture has become ingrained, embedded in the culture of Colorado.
Yeah, definitely.
Because now more and more it's becoming accepted. For years, if you were a marijuana user, you were a criminal. You should be ashamed of yourself and should never admit it in public.
Right.
But now it's like, whatever. We smoke, drink,
yes.
We don't care.
And I have to imagine it's just a repeat of exactly what happened in the years after Prohibition was lifted.
Right.
It was unacceptable, then it was acceptable, then it was pervasive.
Of course, the difference is alcohol prohibition only lasted, a few years.
Well, it lasted, 7 or 8 years, right?
Yeah, but, drugs and...
Yeah, that's been decades.
Decades,
generations.
Yeah, so,
right.
you have a whole generation.
And of course, alcohol prohibition didn't really stop too many people from drinking if they wanted to drink.
True.
Actually, I read somewhere that during alcohol prohibition, drinking actually went up in the United States.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all.
Well, I think what it boils down to is you've still got some politicians in Colorado and other places who are zealots, who are very anti-legalization, and they tend to twist the data and the numbers, in their favor. But when you take polls and you talk to the people, it's very positive by a long shot. So, and unfortunately, with only 3 or 4 years of data, it's going to be a while before the real trends are apparent and you can really read the data and analyze it. But with that said, I think I would say, wouldn't you agree, Andrew, overall, it's been positive.
Yes, actually.
In more ways. It's been positive from a financial standpoint for the state, from a business standpoint with new jobs and, small businesses starting up, so it's so many different ways. Opioid addiction down, deaths down. So,
and the negative aspects are still the negative aspects, but they're not any worse than they were or would have been.
Well, so far, what's happened? There hasn't been any major negative. If there was, it would have been plastered across from coast to coast.
True, I'm just saying in terms of you really don't want underage people.
No. Well, I don't want underage
cannabis or any other substance.
Smoking
like that.
Cannabis, drinking alcohol, smoking
cigarettes,
tobacco, and doing drugs are all harmful on the developing mind and body.
That's right.
So if you're a young person, I don't advocate doing any of those. I don't even think kids should drink caffeine.
No.
Right, I agree.
You've only got one brain. Give it a chance to develop, and then imbibe.
To conclude, since legalization in Colorado, there's been mostly positive effects noted, very few, if any, negative. And then the research is still going on, and there hasn't been many final conclusions. But so far, financially, economically, and socially, environmentally, it's been a good thing for Colorado. They're positive for it, and everyone says that they think it should be legalized, not just in Colorado, but in every state.
Well, when you look at the poll numbers, too, they're higher now pro-cannabis than they were before legalization.
Right, and this is really why the American federalist system works. You know, you can try something in one state or two states or three states and see how it goes, and before you roll it out for the rest of the country. And so far, you know, the test cases are looking good.
And now, this week's cannabis news.
Okay, in the news, Oklahoma recently passed State Question 788, which allowed for medical marijuana use. Now, the State Board of Health came back and said they wrote some kind of legislation that said that medical cannabis is okay, but you can't smoke it. You can only use oil. Now, the state attorney general came back and said, nah, you can't do that. You know, it's like saying you can only drink, you can only have cough medicine, you can't have cough lozenges. I mean,
right, yeah. You can only drink your alcohol through a thimble.
But anyways, the Oklahoma State Attorney, Mike Hunter, give him a shout out. Did the right, and although he said, I did not vote for it. I didn't think marijuana, but the people spoke, and this is what they want, and I'm the state attorney general, and I got to do what the people want. Though I may not agree with it, I got to do with it. And what the state health board tried to do was wrong, and not only that, illegal. They can't. They don't have the right to do that.
Will of the people, man. Strike a blow for democracy.
Right, and this is Oklahoma, which a couple years ago I would have listed as like one of the last states to reform.
Well, we did that story last week. Just that
the ballot initiative.
Ballot initiative passed. I mean, that was not so much a shocker because it's the population, it's the politicians there that.
Well, that's what's happening in some of these conservative states. If you can, not all states you're allowed to do a ballot initiative.
Right.
But in Oklahoma, they did. And what's happening is, the people get together and they sign the petition and get it passed. But then the legislators and the government, who never would have passed it on their own, take that and go, well, how can we screw this up?
Yeah, exactly.
How can we make this as difficult as possible?
Right.
How do we?
Because the people are out in front of the politicians, and the politicians don't even know it.
How do we kick this down the road? Yeah.
Well, what they need to do, the people have to go, well, you got to do what we tell you, and if you don't, we're going to vote you out.
That's what it comes down to, right? All right, I got a silly little news story here. It's actually from a couple weeks ago.
You'd think the people would have had enough of silly little news stories. When I look around me and I see that isn't so.
I'm sorry.
But what's wrong with that?
I need to know.
All right, here we go. Cynthia Nixon. She was in Sex and the City. She's an actress.
Cynthia?
Did I say Cynthia? Cynthia. She is running a kind of goofy campaign in New York to get the nomination to run against Governor Andrew Cuomo.
She's seriously running.
Oh, I know.
No, she's seriously. She hasn't got a shot, but she's seriously running.
She's serious, but some of the stuff that she's done to date.
Well, guys, why is that? Why do some people run for office when they know there's no chance of them winning?
Because they have a point to make, or because they want to set themselves up for the next election. There's lots of reasons why people do it. Or they want to get an appointment within the administration.
So why is she doing it?
Why is she doing it? And why is she making cannabis one of her...
Nixon.
Why is she doing it, and why is cannabis one of her main campaign
I guess she feels pretty strongly about it, and that's a good thing.
Well, good for her.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So Cynthia Nixon made some news a month or two ago when she made a comment about how legalizing marijuana could be considered reparations in the black community. That raised kind of a stink. I mean, that was kind of... So now her
Can't imagine that.
Well, something. So African Americans get arrested at 3 times the rate as white Americans for possession, and African Americans don't smoke pot
any more than
they
that's
do.
Right.
Although I must admit they do smoke better pot than
in my experience.
In my experience, all my African American friends always had great weed. When I lived in New York, I used to go to Harlem just to buy weed because that's where the best weed was.
So anyway, her thing now is, and of course, her platform is very strongly built around cannabis legalization. And Cuomo has historically been against it, although now his latest is he realizes that she's actually getting some traction to some degree with this. So now he's saying he wants to do some studies, and he may consider it after all.
Well, funny how that's happened.
Yeah.
So Cynthia Nixon. So what else is Cynthia doing?
Well, her latest thing now is that she's having a
contest.
She's having a contest. Yeah, she's having a contest. Her website says this may be silly, but she's trying to get her train back on the track, so to speak, because her poll numbers haven't been looking too great in the last few weeks. So she's having a contest. She's giving away a glass bong. And it's going to be signed by a couple of people I never heard of, Abby Jacobson and Lana Glazer of the Comedy Central's Broad City. So anyway, that's my news story. That ain't much, but
Wow.
thought it was kind of interesting.
It's news.
It's news and it's cannabis news.
Yeah, it's topical.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, we hope you enjoyed episode 4 of Vote Pro Podcast. And if you did, we hope you'll write us a review and tell us what you think, or at the very least, give us a rating, hopefully a 5-star rating. Go to Apple Podcasts and give us your thoughts.
A lot of people might say that the fight for cannabis reform is over, that it's not if but when it's going to happen. But it really is not. It is far from over. We still have a lot to accomplish. We still have to close these deals, and we have to do it state by state by state. So, and just because some legislation might call for reform doesn't mean it's good legislation. So what you need to do is you need to call your assembly members, you need to call your senators, you need to call your governor, and let them know that you vote pro-cannabis reform. And if they aren't pro-cannabis, they ain't getting your vote.
We really appreciate our audience. We'd love to hear from you. We appreciate suggestions for topics, for shows. You can reach us via email at votepropot@gmail.com.
Or check us out at VoteProPot.com.
Or follow and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/VoteProPot.
Wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Centennial at the beginning of the day. But here I am in New York City, hiding out in Central Park, getting kidnapped by the police today sometime before dark. But I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Centennial at the beginning of the day. The judge looked down upon me, frowned. He said, "Kid, get on your way. Just don't start out your morning with espresso and a J." I said, "I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Centennial at the beginning of the day." Hitched on out to Portland, caught a ride up to BC, took the bus over to the neighborhood to have a bowl with my coffee. Now I'm up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Centennial at the beginning of the day. Smoking good old Centennial